Darth Vader has always been terrifying, but if we are honest, Star Wars has never truly shown us why. We see him choke an officer here, duel a Jedi there, and strike an intimidating pose in the shadows. But that is the sanitized version, the PG version, the one safe enough for lunchboxes and toy aisles. The real Vader, the one whispered about in fear across the galaxy, is still waiting to be unleashed. This is the man who slaughtered children in a temple, who hunted Jedi across the stars, who burned entire cells of rebels to ash without blinking, and yet we never see that side on screen. The camera cuts away, the tone pulls back, the edges are softened. Which is strange because Vader is not meant to be safe. He is meant to be the monster who keeps you awake at night. Just imagine it. Rebels trapped in a dark corridor, hearing only his breathing before the red glow of a saber ignites. Jedi cut down one by one, realizing their former brother has become their executioner. Vader sitting alone in his chamber, scarred and broken, drowning in guilt and rage that he cannot escape. These are the moments that an R-rated Star Wars could finally give us without compromise. The irony is that Star Wars has already teased it. Rogue One gave us a hallway of terror. The Clone Wars gave us glimpses of his darkness. The comics gave us unfiltered brutality. But these were appetizers, not the full meal. An R-rated Vader story would finally let us sit at the table and see the Dark Lord in all his horrifying glory. And let's be honest, Star Wars needs bold moves right now. Playing it safe has given us shows and films that feel more like products than stories. Taking Vader, the most famous villain in the galaxy, and showing us the truth of his existence would not just shock fans, it would remind them why they fell in love with this saga in the first place. Because sometimes the scariest truths are the ones worth telling. In this video, we're going to break down why an R-rated Darth Vader story is not just a wild idea, but a necessary one. How it could explore his brutality, his humanity, and his horror in ways we have never seen, and why showing the unfiltered Dark Lord might be the boldest Star Wars project ever made. Darth Vader is one of the most iconic villains in cinema, but for all his fame, Star Wars has never truly shown the full horror of what he is capable of. Yes, we see him choke officers, duel Jedi, and unleash his power, but those glimpses are still restrained, softened by the family-friendly nature of the saga. What we do not see is the monster Anakin Skywalker became, the butcher of children, the relentless hunter of Jedi, the nightmare that haunted the galaxy for decades. And that is why an R-rated Vader story could change everything. Think about the moments we already have. In Revenge of the Sith, we hear about him killing the younglings, but the camera cuts away. In A New Hope, he duels Obi-Wan with a stiffness that hides his ferocity. In Empire, he toys with Luke rather than unleashing his full rage. The only times we get close to his true brutality are in the Rogue One hallway scene and flashes in comics or novels. And even then, the camera pulls back before things get too raw. Imagine if it didn't. Imagine seeing the Jedi purge through Vader's eyes, with no filter, no cutaways, no softening. Knights who once fought beside him cut down without mercy, children begging for their lives, only to be silenced by the swing of his blade. That kind of story would not just shock, it would deepen the tragedy of Anakin's fall, showing the cost of his choices in a way the PG-rated films never could. It would also highlight the psychological terror Vader brought to the galaxy. In the films we know he is feared, but we don't feel that fear ourselves. An R-rated series could immerse the audience in that dread, trapping us in the perspective of rebels hiding in the dark as his breathing echoes closer. The anticipation, the silence, and then the sudden eruption of violence. That is how you show Vader as a true horror icon, not just a villain. And it is not just about blood and violence, it is about humanity. Vader is not a slasher monster, he is a broken man. An R-rated story could explore the way he processes his guilt, his grief and his rage through acts of cruelty. The quieter moments, the scars under the armour, the emptiness that drives him to lash out. This is the side of Vader we rarely see because family-friendly Star Wars can only hint at it. The Clone Wars and the comics have already scratched the surface of this complexity. We see Vader question his place, wrestle with his memories, and even briefly show compassion before crushing it again. But imagine that magnified on screen, in a series that doesn't shy away from the ugliness of his existence. His story is not just about power, it is about decay, and that decay deserves to be shown honestly. There is also an argument to be made that Star Wars has matured with its audience. The kids who grew up terrified of Vader in the 70s and 80s are adults now, and they are ready for a story that reflects that fear in a way that hits harder. An R-rated project would not alienate fans. It would reward them for sticking with the saga, offering something bolder than what Disney Plus has delivered so far. Some fans worry that such a story would ruin the mystery, but the opposite is true. By leaning into the horror, by showing us Vader's world as it truly was, we would better understand why the galaxy feared him so deeply. It would not take away his mystique, it would cement it. The more you see of the nightmare, the more unforgettable it becomes. The second angle is to ask what an R-rated Darth Vader story could actually show us that the existing films and shows cannot. Because the truth is, we have already seen him duel Jedi, command fleets, and terrorize rebels. What we have not seen is the scale of the horror he inflicted on a galactic level, the everyday nightmare of living under his shadow. That is the space an R-rated series could finally explore. Start with the Jedi Purge. The films and Clone Wars show us glimpses, but they sanitize the reality. In reality, Vader would have been a walking executioner, cutting down Jedi across the stars, from temples to hiding places, from deserts to cities. Each one of those hunts could be a story, dripping with tension, showing how Jedi fell not just to clones but to the blade of their former brother. The brutality of it is too great for a PG rating, but it is essential to understanding Vader's role. Then consider the rebels. We often see their victories, their hope, their underdog resilience. But imagine a story told from their perspective, when they lose. Cells wiped out in the night, bases discovered and purged, families torn apart as Vader leaves nothing but ashes behind. Those moments rarely make the screen, but they define the terror of his rule. An R-rated series could balance the galaxy's optimism with its despair. And there is the horror element, which Star Wars has only flirted with. Vader is tailor-made for it. He stalks, he breathes, he strikes from the shadows. Rebels trapped in a corridor, clones realizing their former general is now their executioner, smugglers unlucky enough to cross his path. Every one of those stories could play like a horror film, with Vader as the monster in the dark. And unlike most monsters, he is not mindless. He is purposeful, which makes it even worse. At the same time, an R rating could allow us to finally explore Vader's inner world in a more brutal way. His self-hatred, his memories of Padme, his resentment toward the Emperor. These things exist in the canon, but they are often softened for younger audiences. What if we saw the full weight of his nightmares, the rage that wakes him in his meditation chamber, the guilt that twists into cruelty? That is where the broken humanity of Vader shines through. The comics give us glimpses of this, like Vader returning to Mustafar to relive his pain, or striking down those who remind him of Anakin. But live action could amplify that pain into something unforgettable. A psychological horror story dressed as a space opera, where the monster is as tragic as he is terrifying. And then there is the question of tone. An R-rated Vader story wouldn't just be violent, it would be relentless. It would strip away the romanticism of lightsaber duels and show the reality of war crimes, massacres, and broken lives. It would be Star Wars at its most unflinching, and that might be exactly what the saga needs to stay fresh. The final angle is to ask what such a project would mean for Star Wars as a whole. Because let's be honest, making an R-rated Vader story would be a radical move. It would signal a willingness to push the boundaries of what this franchise can be, and it would reshape how future generations view its most famous villain. That is not just a storytelling choice, it is a cultural statement. First, it would give Vader back his edge. Over the decades, he has become merchandised, parodied, and softened. Kids wear his costume, parents quote his lines, and Disney markets him as a symbol rather than a monster. An R-rated project would strip away the toy commercial sheen and remind everyone that Vader is not a lovable mascot, he is a war criminal. That recalibration would make him terrifying again, and it would restore the weight of his presence in the saga. Second, it would expand what Star Wars can be. We have seen animated series, family adventures, gritty thrillers, and even comedy droids. But we have never seen Star Wars fully embrace horror or tragedy without compromise. An R-rated Vader project could carve out a new lane, showing that the galaxy is big enough for all tones and all audiences. That freedom would only strengthen the brand, not weaken it. Third, it would deepen the prequel and original trilogies retroactively. Imagine rewatching Revenge of the Sith after seeing Vader's unfiltered brutality. Suddenly the fall of Anakin feels heavier, the cost of his choices clearer. Imagine rewatching A New Hope after seeing Vader slaughter rebels in cold blood. Suddenly Luke's victory is not just symbolic, it feels like justice. The ripple effect would enhance everything we already know. Fourth, it would challenge audiences to wrestle with moral complexity. An R-rated story wouldn't make Vader a one-note monster, it would force us to see his humanity and his monstrosity in equal measure. That discomfort is powerful storytelling, the kind that lingers long after the credits roll. We would hate him and pity him at the same time, which is the essence of great tragedy. Fifth, it would open the door for more experimental Star Wars. If Vader can carry a horror-style R-rated project, why not let other corners of the galaxy stretch in new directions? A crime drama with the Hutts, a survival thriller with bounty hunters, a war epic about clones left behind. The possibilities multiply once the boundaries break, and Vader could be the one to break them. Of course, there would be risks. Disney's brand is tied to family-friendly entertainment, and an R-rated Star Wars would cause controversy. But controversy is not always a bad thing. In fact, it might be exactly what Star Wars needs to shake off its reputation as a safe, recycled franchise. Taking risks is how you make history. And Vader is the perfect character to take that risk with. And it is worth remembering that audiences have always embraced darker Star Wars when it is done well. Empire Strikes Back, Rogue One, and Andor all proved that fans are ready for mature storytelling. An R-rated Vader story would simply be the next evolution of that trend. In the end, the question is not whether Star Wars could survive an R-rated Vader project. The question is whether it can afford not to try. Because the more the franchise plays it safe, the more it risks fading into mediocrity. And mediocrity is the one thing Vader should never be associated with. That is why an R-rated Darth Vader story would not just be bold, it would be necessary. It would honour the character, challenge the audience, and redefine what Star Wars can be. And that is a risk worth taking.
Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that share button. My main channel is Critical Analysis Hub, where I post Star Wars content about the movies. My secondary channel is Critical Analysis Hub Plus, where I focus on the shows of Star Wars. And my third channel is Critical Analysis Hub XP, where I post comic books. Be sure to take a moment and check them out. Thanks, and may the Force be with you.